Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we discuss the Trinamool Congress leader Abhishek Banerjee and how his rise has hurt the party in the lead up to the upcoming polls in West Bengal. We also take a look at the army recruitment scam. But first, we talk about Delhi. The Aam Aadmi Party, which is the current ruling party in Delhi, has always had a problem with the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. The party has always claimed that it is because of the Lieutenant Governor, who is appointed by the central government, that the party has not been able to govern and implement policies smoothly. These issues also have to do with the fact that the BJP, which is currently in power at the centre and therefore has appointed the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, is a party that has been at loggerheads with the Aam Aadmi Party. So the power tussle between the LG and the Aam Aadmi Party has been there ever since the party came to power in 2015. But now the conversation around this tussle has been revived because on Monday, the central government introduced a new bill to the Lok Sabha. The bill is called the Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi Bill 2021, and it seeks to give more power to the LG. And if passed, many say that it could potentially make the Delhi government practically redundant. In this segment, we talk to Mallica Joshi, who writes on Delhi politics for the Indian Express, about the implications of this bill and the power tussle between the LG and the Delhi government. Mallica, the elected government in Delhi and the Lieutenant Governor, which is appointed by the central government, have always had a tussle going on between them. Could you first encapsulate this tussle for our listeners?
So the tussle essentially started when the Aam Aadmi Party government came into power in 2015, actually, which was their second term. At that time, the structure of power that exists in Delhi is a union territory, but it has special powers. So it has an elected assembly, which is power to make rules and make laws on a variety of subjects, barring, as the constitution and the Delhi Government of National Capital of Delhi Act makes it clear, is empowered to make rules on a variety of subjects except law and order, police and land. All of these are under the centre through the LG. That is the structure that is essentially prevalent in Delhi, but there are ambiguities that exist in the law. For example, when the Chief Minister and Deputy Chief Minister sat on a dharna at the LG house, which continued, I think, for 9 days, it was over the issue of the doorstep delivery of rations, which the government wants to do, which, by the way, now it has notified. But at that time, the LG was not agreed to this. He had raised several issues, including things like how this would increase pollution in the state. So, because of this ambiguity in powers, there has always been a sort of a struggle or a power tussle between the two posts, the post of the Chief Minister and that of the LG.
Mallica also says that this tussle has been much more pronounced since the Aam Aadmi Party came to power. Because one, it came to power with a huge majority. In the first term, 67 out of the 70 MLAs were from their party. And so that time, their expectation of running the city with complete control were very high. The second point being that it was also a very confrontational government. And that, she says, was at odds with what the central government wanted. Moreover, the BJP too had come to power at the centre with a huge majority.
So both these things sort of played into increasing the animosity between the two parties and therefore the two governments. And that is when the real problems actually started to crop up. The biggest ramification of this was seen in the transfers and postings of officers. So in a lot of cases, people appointed by the elected government were later transferred again without their knowledge, and the LG appointed someone of his or her choosing. So this is basically how the problems have escalated over the past few years. According to the Aam Aadmi Party government, it has in the past resulted in several of their policy decisions being delayed. One, as I said, was the doorstep delivery of rations. Then they also said that files regarding 200 units of electricity being given free to people were stuck with the LG for some time. Free rides for women in buses is again something that they mentioned saw some delays. So that is how so far this whole conflict has played out.
And this issue was also taken up by a constitution bench of the Supreme Court in 2018, right? Could you talk about what ruling had the court come up with then?
So the constitutional bench ruling in July 2018 is, for the Aam Aadmi Party government in Delhi, one of the most important rulings that came about in this tussle. What it basically did was tell the Delhi government that you have the powers to make decisions, to make laws and policies on issues except the three that we spoke about: law and order, police, and land. It also told the LG that the LG is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. The one place where it gave powers to the LG was if there is something, a policy or a law that they don't agree with, that he or she doesn't agree with, they will have the power to then send this to the president instead of signing it. But having said that, it also said that this has to be a power that has to be used very rarely. You can't keep sending every bill or every law to the president for their assent. So it basically curtailed the powers of the LG to quite an extent, giving Aam Aadmi Party government a freer hand to come up with the kind of laws, policies that they wanted to.
And we are talking about this now because the central government on Monday introduced a new bill in the Lok Sabha that has once again revived this conversation. Could you talk about what this bill says?
So the bill, I think, has two or three very important points. It says that from now, whenever it comes to the Legislative Assembly, wherever the word government is mentioned, it will mean the LG. So the thing is that in Delhi already, as I said, notifications and laws finally have to be passed in the name of the LG because it is a union territory. But this was never clearly, this line that the government means the lieutenant governor will be added through this amendment if it is passed. That's what the bill does, A. B, it makes it mandatory for the government, which is the cabinet of ministers, to send all files to the LG. Earlier, it was just files related to land, law, and police that was to be sent to the LG. Now, all files, irrespective of whether they're from health, education, will have to be routed through the LG, which means that if the LG does not agree with certain provisions, they will have the power to then raise questions or stop a particular policy, is what the AAP government fears. The third point is that the Legislative Assembly will not have the powers beyond what is decided to form committees. For example, a Legislative Assembly can form committees for inquiry. There is right now a committee for inquiry in riot cases. One is Peace and Harmony Committee is looking at what led to the riots. It's also looking at the role of social media. So these committees and their functioning can be hampered if the LG so decides. So these are the key changes that the bill proposes.
So then it appears, at least from the surface of it, that this bill will give more powers to the LG. And as a result, the Aam Aadmi Party will face problems, especially when trying to implement new laws in the state, right?
Yes. So what it essentially does is override, not really override, but what it essentially does is make, in some sense, the Supreme Court judgment pointless. The Supreme Court Constitution bench judgment, which very clearly said that the LG is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Now, if all files have to be first sent to the LG, that sort of cannot be achieved anymore. The second thing is that if all of these amendments are passed, then the elected government might not have any meaningful power left. So they can formulate rules or regulations or policies, but if everything will have to be passed through the LG, the final deciding body basically becomes the LG. So the government then just becomes a redundant body, is what senior people in the government are. This is the biggest apprehension. The elected government will become a meaningless entity and everything will be decided by the LG.
So right now the bill is obviously just in the Lok Sabha, but what happens if it is cleared and it becomes a law? What are the implications of something like that?
So, see, the short term implications, of course, are the tussle between the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP through the LG. But this bill has long term repercussions for Delhi. It basically means that your elected government has much fewer powers as compared to earlier. And the LG and the center through the LG is the main power center. So it's not just about Aam Aadmi Party versus BJP or Congress. Any government that formed in the Delhi after the bill is passed, if it is, will face these issues. And this is not something new. Even in 1993, when Madan Lal Khurana had become the chief minister of the city, he had also at that point raised issues about how little power the elected government has. Over the years, a lot of issues have been ironed out. And over the past 6 years, of course, because of the Supreme Court judgment, they have become clearer. But governments have found a way to deal with each other in the center and the state. But if this bill gets passed, then that balance of power very clearly shifts towards the center because the LG is the government then, and all rules, all laws, everything has to go through the LG. So this will change the entire relationship that the city has with the elected government because it will have such few powers. And this is not going to just affect the Aam Aadmi Party. Any other party that comes into power in Delhi after this will, be it BJP, be it Congress, be it anyone else, will face the same problems.
And it seems like unless you have a situation where the party at the center is also in power in Delhi, or at least they are similarly aligned, this tussle will likely continue. And then it is the people of Delhi that will end up being affected, right, in terms of its governance?
So, in terms of governance, of course, if your state government is not step with the center and the center has the final deciding power, then it is actually the people in the city that are eventually going to suffer in case policies are stuck, in case some big decisions cannot be taken. Ultimately, it is the people who are going to suffer.
And next we talk about the Trinamool Congress, that is the TMC. The party has been in power in West Bengal for nearly a decade and is currently preparing for the state elections, which are scheduled to take place later this month. Its main opposition in the state right now is the BJP, which has been aggressively trying to make inroads in the state since the last assembly elections. Now, even as it prepares to remain in power, one thing that has hurt the TMC over the past year has been some of its prominent leaders leaving the party and joining the BJP. And at least some of them left the TMC partly because of Abhishek Banerjee, who is the nephew of Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. He right now is the number 2 in TMC. In this segment, we talk to Shantanu Chowdhury, who reports on West Bengal politics for the newspaper, about his rise in the party and how it has affected the TMC. Shantanu, you write that Abhishek Banerjee is now the undeclared number 2 in the Trinamool Congress. Could you talk about what led to his rise?
Well, since the TMC came to power in 2011, Mamata Banerjee gave opportunities to a lot of young leaders. Among them was Abhishek Banerjee. And soon after the TMC came to power, Abhishek Banerjee was made the president of the All India Trinamool Youth Congress. He was very young then and was clearly a firebrand leader who had a lot of promise for the future. And when the TMC candidate Somen Mitra resigned from his post in January 2014, the TMC made Abhishek Banerjee a party candidate from Diamond Harbour Lok Sabha seat. He won that election and became the youngest parliamentarian in that year.
I mean, in that sense, he rose fairly quickly. But considering he is Mamata Banerjee's nephew, how did other leaders in the party react to his rise?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that the Abhishek Banerjee's induction into the party happened after the TMC came to power in 2011. So he wasn't that active in the party when the TMC was in the opposition. But there are several leaders like Mukul Roy, Shubhendu Adhikari, and others who had actually fought for the party and fought against the left front government and helped the party gain grounds in several districts. That's how the TMC came to power. And after coming to the power, those leaders were looking up to Mamata Banerjee, waiting for some kind of a reward for their sacrifices that they have made so far. But as soon as the TMC came to power, Abhishek Banerjee started gaining more prominence into the party, which threatened the other leaders like Mukul Roy, like Shubhendu Adhikari, and also a newcomer party leader like Soumitra Khan. So this is the kind of reason why they felt threatened, and they were soon seen as sidelined. Mukul Roy soon left the party in 2017, and Shubhendu Adhikari also started avoiding party meetings and skipped cabinet meetings, giving a kind of signal that he was also not happy with the rise of Abhishek Banerjee into the party.
And with Mukul Roy and Suvendu Adhikari leaving the party, how much has that hurt the TMC leading up to the polls?
Well, Mukul Roy's departure from TMC has definitely hurt the TMC because he was a man who worked behind the scenes. He was instrumental in preparing election strategies, selection of the candidates, and entire election management. So he was the kind of person that Mamata Banerjee depended on in during elections. And when he left the party in 2017, ripple effects were felt in 2019 Lok Sabha polls when TMC's tally came down to 22 from 34 in 2014, because Mukul Rai helped the BJP gain a lot of ground in West Bengal and also helped them with election strategies. He also knew the weakness of the TMC. So the BJP benefited a lot from the Mukul Rai. And as for the Suvendu Adhikari, he has left the TMC in December last year. So it has to be seen what he can do for the party. He is now contesting the assembly polls for the BJP from Nandigram seat against Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. It has become a very high voltage contest now. So we have to see that whether he becomes a kingmaker or a person who loses his kingdom.
So Abhishek Banerjee's rise has hurt the party because it contributed to these prominent leaders leaving the party. But in what way do you think he has benefited the party?
He has been a youth icon of the party because he is relatively young and he is also an MP, and he is very popular among the Trinamool Youth Congress and also the TMCP, Trinamool Chhatra Parishad, which is the student unit of the TMC. So he is a youth face and popular, and he also brought fresh young energy into the party. And in 2019, he was given the responsibility of managing the election, but he somehow didn't do as expected by the party. So he helped brought in Prashant Kishore, the political strategist, and his firm IPAC. And since then, they have been formulating the strategy for the party for 2021 assembly polls. Now it remains to be seen what he has done so far for the party, and his biggest test will be in this election because he was very instrumental in bringing in Prashant Kishore. So if the TMC succeeds in this election, then we can say that he has done a really good job for the party, because the TMC was under a huge pressure after the BJP won 18 seats in West Bengal. It was a very close contest that has been going on in West Bengal right now. So if the TMC remains in the power, then a lot of credit will have to go to Abhishek Banerjee.
And in the end, we talk about a scam in the army. The Central Bureau of Investigation, that is the CBI, on Monday booked 17 army officers. This included 5 officers of the lieutenant colonel rank and 6 private persons. This was done in connection with an alleged scam involving the army's recruitment process. In this segment, Deeptiman Tiwary, who reports on government agencies and corruption for the Indian Express, talks about what this scam is about.
The scam is basically about these officers taking bribes to help certain temporarily rejected candidates pass recruitment exams through the SSB. So basically, these people were helped in clearing a medical review exam, which is conducted in the army. So it is for that these officers were taking bribes, and the bribes were taken to the 10 to 15 lakhs from each candidate, and multiple candidates were helped pass these exams for recruitment into the army. Several officers even got recruited and have been serving in the army, and it has only now been revealed that these officers had passed the exams fraudulently and for paying bribes. So now all of these officers who have passed and are currently serving have also been booked by the Central Bureau of Investigation. Interestingly, much of the investigation had been carried out by the army itself. The CBI FIR is based on a complaint from Brigadier of Vigilance V.K. Purohit, who first conducted this investigation. And based on that complaint, much of the investigation was carried out in February. And based on that complaint, this FIR has been lodged.
And Deeptiman, who do we understand to be the main person behind the scam?
The main person behind the scam is said to be one Lieutenant Colonel Bhagwan, who is attached with the Air Defense Corps of the Army. He and there is one Naib Subedar Kuldeep Singh, who together were running this racket, and they helped several low ranking to even officer rank people get recruited in army. According to investigations conducted by the army, they have evidence of financial transactions between these officers who got recruited and Naib Subedar Kuldeep Singh and Lieutenant Colonel Bhagwan, who is suspected to have helped recruitment of more than 15 people in the Indian Army. And there are 5 other Lieutenant Colonel rank officers who are said to be associated with Bhagwan in this entire affair. And Naib Subedar Kuldeep Singh is alleged to have touted candidates in the sense that he would solicit candidates who were, rejected during medical review, and he would take them to Lieutenant Colonel Bhagwan, and there would be a financial transaction between the two. Then these people would be helped to pass the exams, and at least 6 officers associated with the medical review board have also been booked by the CBI because they were in cahoots with Lieutenant Colonel Bhagwan and were helping candidates pass the exams.
And so how does the investigation go forward now, and what has the army been saying about this?
Well, obviously the investigation was first started by the army, and the army has said that we have zero tolerance for corruption in the armed forces, and as soon as we got to know about it, we conducted our investigation and then handed over the matter to CBI to take the entire thing to a logical conclusion, because it is only CBI which can prosecute these officers. So from now on, while some bit of investigation has been done by the army, where it has given some video footages of packets being exchanged between the accused, some details of financial transactions, statements of certain officers where the entire conspiracy has been spoken about, all of that has been given to CBI. Now CBI has to accordingly collect evidence in the case and then take it to the logical conclusion.
You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.